Good afternoon. Welcome to Eretz Israel. The Holy Land has just been washed by a long rain, and it's a beautiful day. And even as I say it's a beautiful day, my heart, my mind, my eyes go across the valley in the direction of Gaza, and it's so interesting the effect that when we look at nature and we look at the world with the eyes of gratitude and beauty, we forget about war, we forget about false media, we forget about Jew baiting, which is going on everywhere now. And it's like these two contradictions demand us to make a choice, to make a real choice, a choice that will affect our lives. So what do we do? Should I be happy? Should I be sad? Should I be angry? Should I be passive and accepting? It's an interesting question. What I do is I turn to the tzaddikim, I turn to the rabbis, I open the books, see what they say. It's a good policy in most questions, maybe all questions in life. So we open to today's Torah, Rabbi Nachman, Peitet 89, and look what he says. Techasrehu me'at melokim. God, you made them a little less than gods. Who did God make a little less than gods? That's King David talking through HaKodesh. Well, of course, he's talking about the human race and especially the Jewish people. He made them a little less than gods. If we were chosen to carry this information, we better carry it honestly and truly, and live up to it. To be made a little less than God is a big thing. Of course, you have to understand what that means. And the last bit of the verse says, in the glory and splendor you crowned him. They say in the beginning, the Midrash says, that Adam, the first man, was glowing with so much spiritual light that the animals couldn't even look at him. They were terrified. Couldn't look at him because of the brightness of his light. The Rebbe begins, all that is absent or lacking in a person's life, whether it's physical or spiritual, the lack is also in the divine presence. So when you think, wow, I lack this and I lack that, well, think that the Shekhinah also lacks these things. Shehi b'chinat Elokim, because the name Elokim of God, the judge, Elokim is a name of God that represents the judge, and judging is also a name we apply to the divine presence. The divine presence doesn't show up at your door because you're a nice guy. I mean, he might, but usually it's because he's got some work to do. The divine presence is there to help us. The judgment is really a form of what's supposed to become self-judgment, that we can judge ourselves properly. That's a godly act. Understand that. It's not simple to judge ourselves properly. But if we do it, it's a godly act because nobody else on the planet's doing it, and no creatures are doing it, except the human race. Now, Techasrehu, you made them, God, lacking. We weren't made exactly perfectly like God, but we're like him. Bevadai me'at melukim, certainly less than God. Hayinu achisaron bevadai melukim, that the lack is from this idea of judgment itself, not from the side of Havaya, the ephemeral, the eternal name that we use to describe creating from something from nothing, and not from the name of Adonai, which is the name of our master, rather from this name of the judge. Hayinu achisaron bevadai melukim, the lack is from judgment. Hayinu b'Shechina, which is, we just said, is the divine presence. Keshiyada zot, but when we know this idea that we've just learned, Achisron hu lamala ulamata, it's also above and below this lack. Now, what does that mean? Yada, again we read it, that a chisaron is above. Certainly then a person will have suffering and sadness and difficulty. If you think that everything you lack is also lacking in heaven, it doesn't make heaven, usually we don't relate to it as a place of lack. We relate to heaven as a place of completeness and wholeness and fullness and abundance, which are also true qualities that we can ascribe to heaven. But in the individual's expression of his light, his spark of God, the lack is not only here, it's lacking above. And then the conclusion that it reaches is that a person is going to not be able to serve God with joy because of this consciousness of the lack, and that the lack is also above. And for this, we have to answer ourselves. Mani machayai. What am I? What is my life? What is all this struggle about? Ki hamelech ba'atzmo misaper li achisaron shelo, because the melech, who is represented in the indwelling sense as the divine presence, is telling me about his lack. The infinite being, perfect and infinite and eternal, still has lack when it comes to its presence and relationship in this world. Otherwise, we wouldn't have these insane conditions of life right now. It's all hidden. The truth and the justice. And when we think this thought, who am I? What is my life? God is telling me his own lack. It's not just Avram Shira's lack. Then the person will certainly, the Rebbe's conclusion, will come to great joy. And he will have new brain power. We all need some of that, right? And glory and honor, you crowned him. Which is the idea of the glory and the crowning of a person, is the light on his head. His aura starts to shine. Those transcendent intellects that whirl around us. That is, through the glory and the beauty, that the king is telling me what's happening. Through ourselves, we learn what's happening above. God, we call tzaram tsar li. Every suffering that the Jew goes through, so too does God. It's a partnership. He's not abandoned us for 1 second in all history, but there is hiding that takes place. So the Melech, the King of Kings, tells us through our lives what's missing above. And when a person comes to that recognition, then he is recrowned. He gets a new crown of glory. Because you get your mind back, you get your joy back, you get your understanding is deepened and expressed and expanded, and you suddenly realize that God isn't watching the movie of our existence and our troubles and our difficulties. He is in the tsar, he is in the difficulty and the suffering and everything else. And he feels it just as much, and maybe a little bit more than we do, maybe a lot more. But when you understand that, it's like, wow, God is coming home to us. And we're changing our take on what God really is. This juvenile, immature conception of a divine being is expanding and growing and deepening and widening. And so that we don't have this childish, cartoonish conception of God as this mean, difficult, unpleasant Father in heaven that's always in judgment and looking to bring down the wrath. No, that's not the way it works. That's not who God is. The wrath is usually a buildup of an old account of many difficult things that we don't want to even think of. They're in the Torah. All of it's been produced and copied in the Torah. So, folks, if we get this down, that we're made a little bit less than God and that he's feeling our lacks and our pain and our struggle, and really believe that, it's not an intellectual construct. It's a real thing. It's a real relationship. When we understand that, then your pain, whether you lack a spouse, or you lack money, or you lack children, or whatever the thing is that's causing you the suffering, he's also part of that in that lack. And of course, we want to change it. We want to expand it. We want to transform our lives. But the Rebbe's giving us first the foundational understanding that we need, that we are made a little bit less than God. And that little bit is where we work. That's where we are transforming ourselves. And that's why we're not really from this planet. We're from a much higher realm. We came here for a while to see what we can accomplish. God bless you all. Hanukkah Sameach. We'll see you again.